Okay, great. Look, welcome back. Just let me quickly, in case it's not been clear, let me run you through the timings of how the next 45 minutes is going to work. We've got 15 or so minutes for questions now. Then the kids are going to come back and join us. We're going to sing together and celebrate the Lord's Supper together. And then at the end of that, we will head off to lunch. Now, there may be a chance for a photo. Good thought, Alan. Yeah, maybe when we're all said and done. But Ali's going to lead us through the question time.
Cool. Thank you very much for sending in questions, people. There's loads coming in. We probably won't have time for all of them as ever, but do just keep talking. Come and chat to us afterwards if we don't manage to get to your questions. I'm going to dive right in. Here is one very practical one. Someone says, last night's quiz was the first time I learned who the church elders were and who could take Jamie in a fight. Who is in the church elders and the council, and who are all the helpful people in the church family I should know of? How do I find out? Well, the first thing is, feel free to come and talk to any of us and anyone at any point. We just really want to encourage you to always ask questions like this. The elders at the moment are the three of us up here, and Holty and Mike Bajomo and Daniel McIntosh, wherever he is. And if you're in the church council, do you want to just stand up? Might not be everybody here, but there's a few of the church council. There you go. There's people in the church council. Thanks very much, guys. And we are about to update the website with some photographs, hopefully flattering ones that Joe Kefas took, and you'll be able to see us all up on the website very soon. But the basic thing is just come and ask any of us at any time if you're unsure about this kind of thing, and we can point you in the right direction. Right. We've got a couple of questions about how do we spend our time. So first, a kind of general one. How do I spend my time? Is it wrong to only hang out with church people I've got lots in common with? Or should I actively not do that and try and be friendly with people I've got less in common with? Who wants to have a go at that one? Jamie, do you want to kick us off?
I'll just kick us off briefly. I mean, I think the kind of question almost answers itself in the articulation. Obviously, neither. Neither should we be spending all our time apart from the church, nor should we be spending all of our time in the church, because we have a deep commitment to sharing the gospel with the world around us and living out and doing good deeds in the world, and we have a deep commitment to deep relationship with each other. So whoever you are, with the gifts you've got and the opportunities you've got, I think you just got to work out, what does it look like for me to be deeply committed to the church, and what does it look like for me to be deeply committed to the world, and take it from there.
It's where there's a crossover with what you guys were saying yesterday in the seminar about, an area of life which you're already invested in, already kind of keen on. If you're, regular at your gym or whatever, kind of, it might require a bit of sort of focusing down, not doing 7 things with no interaction between them, but 2 or 3 things where there's more crossover between church and other life.
Great. Let me just push into that with a couple of other questions that are sort of related. So somebody's asked, the example that Christ sets us is to die for one another, that real sacrificial service. Are there any boundaries to that? Is there any point that you say, I can't just keep going? Or a related question, how do you balance serving others, looking after each other, with also looking after your own well-being? How do we work those things out? Thoughts? Sam, do you want to come? You haven't spoken yet, that's the reason.
Yeah, it's a good question. Christ sets us a radical example and calls us to take up our cross daily and die for one another. And most of the time, that isn't going to be in one big gesture, but will be in lots and lots of little ways. The kind of paper cut moments, really, if you know what I mean, little pain, where we have to give up ourselves for the sake of others, self-giving love. I think one of the best ways to kind of think about it is, yes, we do want to look after ourselves, and most of all that will mean we're humble. We aren't God. We need rest. We need time in the Word. We need to take care of ourselves spiritually. We need to watch our own walk. But a good way of thinking about it is, am I just doing that for the sake of me time, or am I doing that so that I can then be recharged to serve my church family? Again, I always tend to find that if I go, we got to watch our hearts, because I think the kind of me time thing actually is more addictive than the serving other people thing. So if I think I need to rest and need to recharge, I've got to be. I find it easier and easier then not to do things for others. So constantly remembering that actually rest is really important and good, and the Lord commands us to rest too. But then thinking, I'm resting so that I can be recharged to serve my church family, which is a slightly different way maybe of thinking about self-care than the world might sometimes speak about it. I don't know if you guys have anything to add there.
Yeah, I was going to say something similar, and in terms of what's my motivation for that at ground? Because actually, I find if I'm overworking, if I'm kind of driving myself into the ground doing things for other people, it's normally actually about me. That at base, I don't want to let people down. I want to impress people with what I'm doing. I don't want people to think that I'm weak, which has brought it back to selfishness again. So we can overserve through thinking about ourselves, or we can underserve through thinking about ourselves and thinking, how do I most glorify God through this? How do I honor Jesus Christ? How do I recognize that I'm a human so that I'm resting in order to do those things? I think is the good foundation for that.
That's really helpful. Yeah. So checking our hearts, because there are times where we can be saying yes, 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 and it's actually pride that's making us say that. Helpful.
And that's ultimately not loving to other people if I run myself into the ground and can't serve anymore.
Great. Final question, I think, on this theme of how do we use our time, how do we prioritize, that kind of thing. Should this gospel culture be a priority within Crossway, so our local church, or is it something we're trying to cultivate London-wide, worldwide amongst Christians? Basically, at what point, how far does it go out? And for us individually, how do we prioritize Crossway friendships, relationships over other Christian friends or other wider Christian groups?
Again, the different answers might apply to different people. I think those in church leadership have some responsibility to relationships with other churches nearby in a way that maybe you don't if you're not in leadership in the church. Not so you can't, but I don't think you have a responsibility to think if there's a church in that place, I must move towards them. I must be visiting lots of different churches on Sunday for the sake of unity. I think the New Testament would encourage a prioritization towards the local body of believers of which you are a part. And yet at the same time, I think it does have a vision for partnership across local bodies of believers as well, in a way that's a priority and should be expressed with Slovakia or with Chile or whatever it is. So yes, there's a sense in which there's a unity, but there's a principle of proximity, I think, that means we have a higher priority of commitment to those who are nearby than we do to those who are far away. So you have a much higher commitment. There's a much higher requirement of commitment to the group of people in this room and those who aren't here at Crossway than I think you do, certainly, to take an extreme example, to a church in Australia on the other side of the world, but probably also to a church in the other side of London. Proximity matters, I think, in these relationships, and that's a big part of how we work it out. The relationships, responsibilities or opportunities might play into that as well. It might be that you've got a day job or an opportunity that connects you with believers from other churches, and making the most of those and doing that well will make a difference. If you don't, and it's less of a priority for you.
So not just geographic proximity, but also relational proximity.
Yeah.
But that's a good principle, Jamie.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, moving from sort of within us as a church, just picking up on, I guess, particularly the last talk, Jamie, on this being spilling out into the world and being a kind of demonstration of the gospel for the world. A couple of questions about kind of tricky things to navigate with our non-Christian friends and colleagues and neighbours. So first of all, how about if we've got close non-Christian friends who know us well and know our flaws, and there's times we've hurt them and failed them, how do we show Christianity is making a difference despite the fact that we've sinned against them? Is there a way we can be distinctive in that? And then sort of flip it around, what do we do to be distinctive when our friends or colleagues are being very obviously sinful around us? How do we do that without being moralistic or judgmental?
So I'll give the first one, which was when we stuff up. The gospel should free us up to be the quickest people to admit that we've stuffed up. And it's in those moments, isn't it, where we say, look, I'm really sorry, I've done this and I know it's wrong. And I don't just kind of know it's wrong because of the effect it might be having on you, or because our world says it's wrong. I know it's wrong because the Saviour who died for me says it's wrong. And I'm really sorry about that. And I need Jesus. Basically, admitting our need will glorify our Saviour. Not just seeing the change. Yes, there will be change, God willing, in us as His Spirit goes to work in us and we are salt and light to the people around us. But it is also particularly in those moments where we've messed up that we can point to Jesus, and we can be the first to admit our need. We should be a humble people who, when the world finds it difficult to admit going wrong, we can say, no, we do go wrong.
Yeah. And it's actually it's quite unusual, isn't it, for someone to give you a genuine, heartfelt, no excuses, no justification apology, just I wronged you.
I messed up really badly a couple of years ago in a school, and the head teacher was involved, and the parents came in, and do you know, it was stunning. Here, my heart was, I've got to defend myself in this meeting. I've got to show my professionalism and show, well, actually, this is what I just said. I'm really sorry. That was wrong. I shouldn't have done that. And the whole meeting changed. They were just totally silent. They didn't know what to say back. Because I think they were just shocked. And you're right, the heartfelt sorry is a shock sometimes. And I think that we have permission to shock people with heartfelt sorries as Christians. Yeah.
How about sorry, I kind of combined two questions, but how the other one, where our friends around us are either sinning against us or just living a very obviously sinful lifestyle? How do we be distinctive about that, not condone it, but without being judgmental?
I think this is where, well, it's always so striking, isn't it, the way Jesus, sinners and tax collectors were drawn towards him, right? So those who, can I use that? Sorry, this keeps slipping away. I'm going to go to this, Chris. Sinners and tax collectors were drawn to him. They loved spending time with him. Those who were sort of obviously immoral in their lifestyle, they wanted to be with him. And I think that's because Jesus was the living embodiment of what you see in 1 Peter, which is that there's a purity to the church, because there's a purity to Jesus. We don't join in with them. We don't, in the words of 1 Peter, join in with the flood of debauchery that we see in the world around us. But at the same time, we don't withdraw from the world in a way that would send the signal, we're not for you. We're kind of against you. We don't really want anything to do with you. And so I think the two things we need to hold together is a distinctive purity that is in and of itself attractive, actually, and a spirit of being for the people that we are with, which will express itself in loving concern for them in lots of different ways. So that even though in your office they all go out and get drunk on Friday night and you don't join with them in that, they do know that you're the person who's for them in the rest of life and concerned for them and interested in them. You don't just turn up, earn your living, go home while they're all this little group of friends and you're the one who's never interested in them. You're for them in all the other ways you can be, but you don't join with them when they join in the sin. And I think actually 1 Peter would say that's and Jesus' life tells us it's a very compelling combination of things.
Thank you. Okay, got a series of questions now. In fact, yeah, hopefully this will go particularly to your talk, but obviously everyone chip in on the sort of home maintenance. How do we deal with things when things are hard, when we sin, we hurt to each other? So some tricky situations. Somebody says, a lot of the hardest situations occur when one person doesn't even think they're in the wrong. So they haven't realized they've wronged the other. How do we handle that kind of situation when one person hasn't asked for forgiveness, doesn't seem to want forgiveness?
Yeah, absolutely. That is, quite possibly the hardest thing when people are defensive and they say, no, I haven't done anything wrong, or they refuse to accept it. It's so big so I'd recommend a book called Unpacking Forgiveness by Chris Brauns, Brauns, Unpacking Forgiveness on this. I think, again, it's kind of like parameters that we can say. We don't have a right to feel bitter We don't have a right to take matters into our own hands. So in Sam's passage yesterday, when we were looking at Romans 12, so there's Romans 12, verse 18 and on into 19. If possible, so far as it depends on you, live peaceably with all. Said that this morning. Beloved, never avenge yourselves, but leave it to the wrath of God. For it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. Now, if we've lived a rather kind of cozy, cosseted life and we've never experienced sin or been close to real evil, then we might find that offensive, that kind of language, vengeance is mine, I will repay. But if we've either experienced real grievous sin against ourselves, perhaps some form of abuse, or a member of your family's maybe been murdered, or something like that, the desire for vengeance, the desire for justice, there's something righteous about that, but there's not anything righteous about taking it into our own hands. But knowing that the Lord will bring complete justice in that situation is the thing that liberates us to not hold bitterness and not hold resentment. Now, Chris Braun's in his book unpacks, name of the book, this question of, if someone refuses to accept that they've done something wrong, do we then still have to just automatically forgive them, default just forgive them, suck it up? And he kind of talks through that, and it's complicated. And Christians would disagree on this over, so some would say, yes, you always forgive, always, every single time, even if the other person does not acknowledge they're wrong at all. And others would say, well, no, if they refuse to acknowledge it, if they're not sorry in any way, shape, or form, then we don't have a duty of kind of automatic forgiveness where we just kind of let them off and forget about it. But either way, I think we would all agree, sort of fairly clearly from there, it's not our job to take vengeance. And there's a danger of kind of drifting into kind of pop psychobabble, but I think there's truth to this, that bitterness hurts us and does nothing to the other person, and so knowing that if the person who's hurt us is a Christian, then their sin has been forgiven at the cross. Jesus' blood literally ran down the cross to pay for their sin against me. And if this person is not a Christian, they will face God in judgment on the last day. And both those things are very powerful for me to be able to say, okay, I don't need to fix this myself.
Just one kind of quick follow-up to that. You gave an example of kind of trying to go towards people, greet them, even if you've been hurt by them. Is there ever, if that's causing you ongoing hurt and making it harder not to feel bitterness, is there ever a point where you say, I am going to distance myself from somebody? So setting aside on abuse, bullying, which we've said is a different category, but in these kind of situations, is it ever okay to distance?
Yeah, I mean, complicated. That's right. Yeah, I mean, yeah. If there's someone, I mean, let's hope this never happens in our church family. But if there is someone in life who you're constantly going towards them and only ever being rebuffed, only ever being pushed back, then it almost, yeah, that would feel almost foolish to continue to kind of put yourself in the line of hurt. But if it's a kind of next level down, we actually discussed this a little bit in our group yesterday morning, of it just feels like we're always giving out, always giving out, always giving out. I just can't give out anymore. Then where it's not where it's not as extreme as we are personally suffering in an ongoing way by confronting that situation, but we're just loving people who are hard to love, loving people who don't give anything back, then it's Jesus's example that is the example, who loved us even unto death, who loved us when we were giving nothing back to him. In fact, we were giving, we hated him when we were in the world, and that's our natural human disposition. And he gave and gave and gave to us. So that's what enables us to give out to others when we don't get anything back. But yeah, messy and complicated. That's the thing. It is messy and complicated. So I think, hopefully there's some sort of guides, but these are the kind of things that you'd want to be talking about with one another. Ask more another time.
We've got time for one more question, or are kids about to arrive? Okay, we might need to wrap up there then. Sorry, there's some questions we haven't got to, but please come and just chat to us afterwards, or talk amongst yourselves. Thank you very much. Great. Jamie, over to you. We're going to share the Lord's Supper together.
Well, what we're going to do is get the kids back in. So we'll take a short break just for the kids to come back in. Don't go anywhere, but parents, be ready to receive your children. And parents of creche age kids, head and get your kids now, please.